Good morning. Welcome to the Family Recovery Conference and our live Q&A post-Thanksgiving fireside chat. I went to a fireside chat with Facebook and Google and Twitter a couple weeks ago. And we sat down and asked questions, and Facebook, Google, and Twitter asked us questions about how they could be more supportive and helpful in helping families impacted by addiction. It was a fabulous event to be a part of and to be able to really sit down with people who are making the decisions and the plans for 2019 in our biggest social media platforms and our biggest providers of information. And I wanted to sit down with you guys today because I get questions and through email and through Facebook and different things about how to handle some situations that we have going on in our families. And I know that for me, it was really helpful to have guidance. And I have been fortunate to be connected to a really strong recovery community, with the collegiate recovery community, with family recovery, with all different realms of recovery. And I have found that immersing myself there has been really helpful. So I just wanted to share, some of the wisdom of a family 3 years in recovery, sustained recovery, and also as a now trained interventionist, some answer your questions. So here I am to answer your questions. And I hope that everybody had a calm and peaceful holiday and that you were able to find joy in the moments. I know that there were times that the holidays were a very big challenge for our family because we weren't sure how people were going to show up and if they were going to be healthy. And so we really, sometimes there's a little bit of dread going into the holidays, and it was difficult to find this joy that everybody was talking about and this excitement when we had somebody that wasn't well. So I'll get to the questions. One of the first questions was, how long does recovery take? And I thought that was such a good question because I feel like, when my kids were younger or babies, there were these books that were called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And there was What to Expect the First Year. And I read those books and I read ahead so that I would be prepared. But the book stopped at What to Expect the First Year. And then we kind of were left hanging and had to really depend on our communities and our friends who were maybe a little bit ahead of us to help us with the situations with our little kids and as our kids grew up. So when somebody asks me how long does recovery take, it takes what it takes. It takes what it takes, whatever, but there are some parameters around that. So in the brain science, it takes 90 days for a brain to create new neural patterns. And depending on the length of use, it takes time for the brain to heal. So we're looking at a year to 18 months of brain healing that's really happening post-use. So once use has ended and the brain has the chance to really start to rebuild and bring back those new or create new neural patterns. And then really we're looking at 5 years of sustained recovery before we can really say that the disease is in remission. And then, recovery is a lifetime practice. We have to have, the really core pillars of well-being in place to keep ourselves healthy. And as family members, we can be supportive of that. And it's very helpful to know that, this just doesn't end after 30 days or after a treatment episode. Everything has changed. It hasn't. It takes time to heal, just like if you were treated for cancer or an autoimmune disease where you went through a treatment phase and then you had to recover. So recovery is an ongoing process So to answer the question, how long does it take? At least 90 days for the brain to start healing, and then another year to 18 months of non-active use for recovery to really take hold. And then about 5 years is a really good measurable time for sustained recovery. Now, there may be a recurrence of use in there, and that just means that somebody needs a higher level of care. It doesn't mean that they failed. It doesn't mean that the treatment didn't work. It just means that they need a higher level of care than what they're getting at the moment. Another question that we got was, does it help to check in with adult children's friends if you're worried, or is that ineffective and trouble causing? So it depends, right? It depends on what your worry is. It depends on where your adult child is in their use or their recovery, and where you are in your own recovery. So I would start with, why are you worried? Has your child given you cause to worry? Because they're an adult with a brain disorder, we do have to have some level of, I don't want to say accountability, but some level of awareness. That's the word. We need to have some level of awareness around their life and their lifestyle. And part of that is having agreements. If I see such and such behavior, I'm going to respond like this. So it takes having a conversation, a sit-down conversation as a family when somebody has been treated for a disorder or a disease, and to say, okay, if I see these behaviors, that will cause me to think that you might be in danger or need assistance, or, we might be headed towards a recurrence of use. So having a really healthy conversation about the disease and about or disorder, substance use disorder, and what the signs of an oncoming recurrence of use look like, so that we can say, hey, I noticed that this is happening, and that leads me to believe that maybe you might need some help or some guidance or some support. And then would I reach out to an adult child's friend? I would say yes, if the circumstances were such that you maybe hadn't heard from them in a few days and you have an agreement that they check in regularly. If you're noticing something on social media that might seem concerning, and if you just haven't been able to reach them. Otherwise, I think that might, yes, cause some trouble because you're not communicating with that person directly. So I feel like direct communication is the best tactic. And if you're sending a text, or you're leaving a message, or you're writing a message, I would say, hey, I'm feeling concerned. Can you just reach out and let me know that you're okay? And then if you don't get a response, then you might take it a step further. But always bring it back to I am statements. I am feeling, I feel worried, so could you just let me know that things are okay? Or could you, send up a flare if you need help? Another question that we got was, do you have any advice for grandparents who don't want to enable their son or daughter, but are worried about the well-being of their grandkids? So I have some thoughts around the word enabling, because sometimes enabling can make us feel bad as caregivers and as family members, like we're doing the wrong thing if somebody says we're enabling by being aware or paying attention or offering support, or putting our attention around people that don't have the ability to maybe make choices for themselves, which would be grandchildren or other children in a family with somebody who might be in active use. So again, I always go back to conversations and communication. If you have worry about the well-being of your grandchildren, yes, it is your responsibility to have that maybe uncomfortable conversation with your children and say, I am noticing this, I am concerned about this, and how can I be supportive of your well-being and the well-being of the grandchildren? Now, if you feel like they're in danger, then I would absolutely make steps to get them out of danger and then have the conversation. And it's best to have these kinds of conversations when people aren't under the influence. But if that is not possible, then, you want to make sure that you are the most calm, standing in the most strength, with the most emotional regulation, meaning you're not being reactive or hysterical or overly emotional, but you are being strong and powerful and addressing the situation with facts and with truth. So we can't really argue with the truth. So if a child is in danger, the right responsible thing to do is to get them out of danger and then have a conversation with the parents. So I would say by not having the conversation, then that would be allowing for the behavior. I hope that answers your question. If not, you can email me again and I'll dig into it a little deeper. A lot of the questions, there are layers. There are many layers, and there's a lot of circumstances that make the questions, have nuances. So feel free when you're sending your questions to be really, really specific, and we'll answer them as best we can, and hopefully get you on a path of peace or action. Another question was, I have an agreement with my loved one who has been in recovery or has sustained sobriety for 45 days. And right now, my loved one's not following the agreement. And by agreements, I mean, we have put in place a document that says, these are the parameters or boundaries in the family, and this is what I expect of you. This is what you can expect from me. And if these things aren't happening, we're going to sit down and have a conversation about it, and we're going to have to come up with a new agreement if you can't follow this agreement. So the question was, my child's not following our agreement. Should I text him and tell him he has to move out? My first little red flag there is, should I text him? And my second little red flag there is tell him to move out. So if you have an agreement for your recovering loved one that they can live in your home, and you have gone from this agreement to asking them to leave, what has transpired in between? Is there a step in between, like a conversation, addressing the agreement and raising their awareness around what behavior is prompting you to feel this way? Is there a step in between that extreme? People, not just people in recovery, have a hierarchy of needs, and you can Google Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the number one thing is to have your basic need met, which is safe housing or a safe environment. And so if you have a loved one who's working on their recovery and they've done something that is making you feel like you can't handle the situation, that it's the extreme is to ask them to leave, then you have to be prepared with a place for them to go, or you have to be prepared to have the conversation, because taking away that basic need, which is a safe environment, which is housing, you're putting recovery in jeopardy. Now, if the person is not adhering to the agreement, crossing a line or a boundary that you have put in place in the agreement, that is a call for a conversation. That is a call for communication. That is a call for, okay, we need to sit down and go back to the agreement because I feel that a line is being crossed here and we have an agreement. Now, the other red flag was the text. I am of the belief that communicating via text, these highly emotional, highly triggering, highly life-changing or life-altering conversations should not be delivered by text. I think we tend to say things that we wouldn't say. There are tones and inflections that people can't hear, and that we use text in a way that is less than courageous when we really need to have courageous conversations. So if you feel like you're planning to make a request or shift a dynamic and you want to do it by text, I would recommend doing a self-check on that and saying, would this be better in a face-to-face conversation? Could it be jeopardizing everyone's recovery if this text is dropped in the just wrong moment? So asking to have a conversation and asking for communication, I think is always the best path to be supportive of yourself and to be supportive of others. Dave Cook on our Family Recovery Conference has a really powerful talk on listening, healing through listening. And he talks about having these kinds of conversations and the importance of meeting people where they are and really listening so that you can keep connection and not destroy connection, and really create the kind of environment that it is supportive. So it sounds like to me, if your child's not following the agreement, that the next right move would be to request a meeting or a sit down and have a conversation and try to not use text as your mode of communication around recovery, unless it's really the only possible means, but use it more for like dinners at 6, I'll meet you at the restaurant type things. Okay, the other question was about siblings and what to do or how to be supportive of siblings in this situation when you have a family member in active use or in recovery, because sometimes there's been a lot of damage to those relationships as somebody, who's been in active use has kind of terrorized the younger siblings or the family members, and they haven't really had choice in a lot of the ways that things have been, and it's been chaotic and a little bit scary maybe for them. And so how do we help the siblings reconnect their relationship? Again, it goes back to communication and really trying to restore the bonds. And one of the best ways to help siblings is to help them understand the disease of addiction and how the disease and the disorder impacts the brain. And on the Family Recovery Conference, we have an outstanding, and I mean outstanding, talk from Dr. Crystal Collier on the impact of substance use on the brain. And it really helps you understand, and would really be helpful for young people to understand what has happened, or any age people, what has happened to someone they love when they've been impacted by addiction this way, when they have a very severe or moderate to severe substance use disorder that has impacted the whole family, that has impacted the relationships of the children or the siblings, whether they're children or adults. So giving them the tools to understand first that, we hold this as a disease or a disorder of the brain that results in these kind of symptoms or behaviors, and that they are not intentional, and that once the substance takes over the brain, it then tells the body, or the body tells the brain, I need this thing right now, and it doesn't matter what I have to do to get it. This is the only way I'm going to live. And if siblings and partners and understand that this is something that the person has lost the power of choice and the power of control, then it helps to be able to restore those sibling bonds, if they really understand the disease. And then part of recovery is really for a person to make peace with the actions that happened in active use, and being able to go to their family and say, I'm just sorry, or I never intended to hurt you. Because really it's not something that siblings can control. But now that somebody's in recovery, you can shift your attention and ask, what do you need now? What do you need? We have 2 younger children in our family, and we had to really stabilize for them and really get the environment to feel safe and secure and stabilized, and get back into the rituals and routines that feel nourishing to them. So what can you do for the siblings? You can restore balance. You can maintain your emotional stability. You can, and emotional regulation. You can give them space to talk about their feelings, which could be with you or with a trusted provider, like, give them access to a therapist where they can discuss their feelings and their thoughts, and really just create an environment of calm. And then as they understand the disease and the disorder, and as your loved one with the substance use disorder starts to heal, they will be able to start to restore those bonds and those connections. So provide a really calm, loving environment. Turn your attention to the siblings. Ask them for what they need, and really, really listen to them too. Because what happens with siblings is they kind of become second and needless. Like their needs don't fully get met, or they have to just really care for themselves. So if you can give them some really deep care, that will really help to heal them as well. One of the things I like to do with families when we first start working together is to draw a circle on a piece of paper. Get a piece of paper and draw a circle on it. And in the middle, let's see, just a great big circle. And in the circle, I ask all the family members to write down how they want to feel. So you can do this with your loved ones, with your younger kids or with siblings and just say, you know, when we're together, how do you want to feel? And they put those words in the circle. And then on the outside of the circle, you put the words that you don't want to feel. And then we all devote to creating the environment that brings those feelings forward, right? So for a sibling, you know, they might want to feel noticed, or they might need to feel part of some, you know, like they belong. And so when you get those words, it gives you the secret, you know, password to really what they need in their heart. So again, all the way back to sitting down and having the conversations. So I have one more question, unless somebody wants to type a question in. I'm glad you guys are here. This is good. I have one more question, and that is my loved one, my young adult child lives with the grandparents and has admitted to using for a period of time, and now she has stopped using, but she doesn't want me to. She told me about it, and then doesn't want the grandparents to know. So what do I do? So I'll take you back to I think a conversation is in order. I think a conversation with the whole family is in order in this situation, because if your young adult had an eating disorder, an autoimmune disease, diabetes, some kind of heart condition, any of those things, and they were living with your parents, even if they were, you know, taking care of themselves in every other way with work and or school, or, you know, and being helpful to your parents, you would sit down and have a conversation about it. You would sit down and say, you know, he has this autoimmune disease or diabetes or an eating disorder, and what the proper care and treatment for that looks like this, and we're going to need your support here. And we talk about it without any shame. You know, there's no shame in having a disease that is a little bit out of your control once it's activated, and a lot out of your control once it reaches certain stages. So, you know, the sitting down and having a conversation and saying, okay, this happened. This disorder has been activated. This is the proper care and treatment for that disorder, and this is how we need support. And, you know, do we have questions about that? You know, she's or he is going to do this. He's going to go to a therapist or an intensive outpatient program, and we need your awareness around this. And then we create an agreement that says, you know, there will be no use in the house. There will be guidelines around hours of coming back in and out, you know, those kind of things, so that there's boundaries set in place for the grandparents and there's agreement set in place from all of you. So like I said, it all comes back to conversation and communication. And substance use disorder and addiction, they thrive in silence and secrets and shame. So the more open we are, and the more we talk about it, and the more honest we can be, and the more emotionally regulated we can have these conversations in, then the more healing that comes about, and the chances of recovery happening or remission happening are far, far greater if the whole family understands the disorder and the whole family is communicating about it. So I think the lesson of the day is to really use your voice. and if you can't have a conversation or sit down and have a family meeting or communicate without it staying emotionally regulated or without drama, then I would recommend bringing a neutral party in to guide the conversation. And you can access recovery coaches, you can access interventionists, you can access therapists for this kind of conversation. And it really helps to have, somebody who's neutral, who can, keep the level of emotion at peace and have some guidelines in place for an empowering conversation. So if we don't have any more questions this morning, we're going to wrap it up and we will come back to you again next week with another Q&A session. And also, I invite you, if you haven't registered for the conference, to go ahead and register. Some exciting news. We've decided that we're going to keep the conference running until the end of December so that you guys have time to watch all of the content. And then we have a new conference coming at the beginning of 2019, which I'm super excited to bring to you because I've been getting feedback from so many of you about things that you want to know about. So if you have a question or a comment or some feedback, feel free to email me at shelly@familyrecoveryconference.com, and I will reach back out to you with some December holiday information, and you can join. I have two really good Q&As coming up, one with Bev Buncher, who is the creator of Be a Loving Mirror, or the BALM method of family recovery. And she teaches how you can be your loved one's best chance at recovery. And then Pam Lamhart and I from Thrive Family Support will be doing another live Q&A where we're going to talk about when you have someone with active use in your family going into the holidays, and when you have someone in early recovery going into the holidays. So I'm glad that you guys could join us today. I will double check one more time to see if anybody needs to post a question. And then we will wrap it up for this Sunday Fireside Chat. And I will look forward to connecting with you again later. Have a good week.